Hello again, guys. I am going to finish reading Who Fears Death by Nnedi. I think it's Nnedi. It's N-E-D-I, Nnedi or Nnedi. I'm not sure how Nigerians pronounce that. The double letter to start a name. We don't have in English that I know of. So I'm going, is her name Nnedi or Nnedi? And if you know how to pronounce her name, let me know down below. So this is a Nigerian writer, female Nigerian, oh, well, you know what, I said her name. She's a Nigerian writer who is writing a fiction that I'm finishing up today called Who Fears Death. Throughout the book, the protagonist and antagonists are constantly dying and being returned. Well, yeah, or coming real close to death and coming back. I love it. I just love it. It makes it seem, it illustrates the point that death can be a revolving door, except you don't keep coming back as the same person. You would come back as a different personality in life. Chapter 60. Who Fears Death? Change takes time, and I'd run out of it. The moment I finished with that book, something began to happen. As it happened, I got up to run and realized I was caught. What I can tell you is that the book and all that it touched, and then all that touched what it touched, and so on, everything in that small sandstone hut began to shift. Not to the wilderness, that wouldn't have scared me, someplace else. I dare say a pocket in time, a slit in time and space, to a place where all was gray, white, and black. I would have loved to stand and watch, but by then they were dragging me by my hair past what remained of Lu Yu's body. I would have loved to stand and watch, but by then they were dragging me by my hair past what remained of Lu Yu's body onto one of the boats. They were too blind to see what had begun to happen. I sit here. They will come and take me. I have no reason to resist. No purpose in living. Wita, Lu Yu, and Binta are dead. My mother is too far away. No, she wouldn't come to see me. She knows better. She knows fate must play out. The child in me, the child of Wita and me, is doomed. But to live even for 3 days is to live. She'll understand. I shouldn't have made her. I was selfish. But she will understand. Her time will come again, as mine will, when the time is right. But this place that you know, this kingdom, it will change after today. Read it in your great book. You won't notice that it has been rewritten, not yet, but it has. Everything has. The curse of the Okiki is lifted. It never existed. Shaw. I don't know if that's Okiki, O-K-E-K-E, or Okeke. Epilogue. I sat with her all those hours, typing and listening, mostly listening. Onye Sonwu, she looked at her symboled hands and then brought them to her face. Finally, it's done, she sobbed. Leave me now. At first, I refused, but then I saw her face change. I saw it become like a tiger's face, stripes and fur and sharp teeth. I ran out of there clutching my laptop. I didn't sleep that night. She haunted me. She couldn't. She could have escaped, flown away, made herself invisible, moved herself into the astral world and run off, or glided off, as she liked to say. But she wouldn't do any of that because of what she'd seen during her initiation. She was like a character locked in a story. It was truly awful. The next time I saw her was as they dragged her to that hole in the ground and buried her to her neck. They chopped off her long, bushy hair, and what was left stood on end, as defiant as she was. I stood in the crowd of men and few women. Everyone was shouting for blood and revenge. Kill the Iwu. Tear her apart, oh, Iwu demon. People laughed and jeered. The Okiki savior is uglier than the Okiki. Sorceress indeed, she is incapable of nothing but hurting our eyes. Iwu murderer. I noticed a tall, bearded man with a partially burned face, what looked like a severely mangled leg and one arm. He was near the front, leaning on a staff. Like everyone else, he was Nuru. Unlike everyone else, he was calm, observant. I'd never seen Daib, but Onye Sonwu had described him clearly. I'm sure this was him. What happened when those rocks hit her head? What happened when those rocks hit her head? I'm still asking that. There was light that flowed from her, a mixture of blue and green. The sand surrounding her buried body began to melt. More happened, but I dare not mention it all. Those things are only for those of us who were there, the witnesses. Then the ground shook and people started running. I think in that moment, everyone, all of us Nuru, understood where we'd gone wrong. Maybe her rewriting had finally kicked in. We were all sure that Ani had come to grind us back to dust. So much had already happened. Onye Sonwu told the truth. The entire town of Durfa, all the fertile men were wiped out, and all the fertile women were vomiting and pregnant. The young children didn't know what to do. There was chaos in the streets all over the 7 kingdoms. Many of the remaining Okiki refused to work, and that caused more chaos and violence. The seer Rana, who had predicted something would happen, was dead. Daib's building had burned to the ground. We were all sure it was the end. So we left her there in that hole, dead. But my sister and I didn't run far. We went back after 15 minutes. My sister, yes, I am a twin. And I also am a twin to a male. I am Claudia. He is Claude. My sister, my twin, she uses my computer, and she has been reading Nnedi Okorafor's story. She came with me to the execution, and when it was all over, we were the only ones who returned. And because my sister knew Nnedi Okorafor's story, and because she is my twin, she was unafraid. As twins, we've always felt a responsibility to do good in the world. My status as one of Chasa's twins was why they allowed me to see her in jail. It's what drove me to take down her story, and it is what will help me fight to publish it and keep my sister and myself safe through the backlash. My parents were two of the few Nuru who thought it was all wrong, the way we lived, behaved, the great book. They didn't believe in Ani. So my sister and I grew up non-believers too. All the women, Okiki and Nuru, found that something had changed about them. As we were walking back to they didn't believe in Ani. So my sister and I grew up non-believers too. As we were walking back to Nnedi Okorafor's body, my sister yelped. When I looked at her, she was floating an inch off the ground. My sister can fly. We would later find out that she was not the only one. All the women, Okiki and Nuru, found that something had changed about them. Some could turn wine to fresh, sweet drinking water. Others glowed in the dark at night. Some could hear the dead. Others remembered the past before the great book. Others could peruse the spirit world and still live in the physical. Thousands of abilities, all bestowed upon women. There it was, Nnedi's gift. In the death of herself and her child, Nnedi gave birth to us all. This place will never be the same. Slavery here is over. We removed her body from that hole. It was not easy because all around her was melted sand, glass. We had to shatter it to get her out. My sister cried the entire time, her feet barely touching the ground. I cried too, but we took her. My sister removed her veil and covered Nnedi's broken head with it. We used a camel to help take her body out to the desert east of here. We brought another camel with us to carry the wood. We burned Nnedi Okorafor's corpse on the funeral pyre she deserved, and we buried her ashes near 2 palm trees. As we filled in the hole, a vulture landed in the tree and watched. When we finished, it flew away. We said a few words for Nnedi Okorafor and then went home. It was the most we could do for the woman who saved the people of the 7 Rivers Kingdom. This place that used to be part of the kingdom of Sudan. Chapter 61, Peacock. Chapter 62, Sola speaks. But the great book had been rewritten in CBD, at that. Over those first few days in Durfa, there was change. Some women began encountering the ghosts of those men wiped out by Onye Sonwu's impetuous actions. Some ghosts became living men again. No one dared ask how this was possible. Smart. Other ghosts eventually vanished. Onye Sonwu might have been remotely interested in all this, but then again, she had other concerns. Recall that the daughter of my student gone wrong was Ishu, a fundamental shapeshifter. Onye Sonwu's very essence was change and defiance. Daib had to have known this even as he flew from his burning headquarters, where the body of Onye Sonwu's dead love, Wita, became ash. Daib, who was known, Daib, who was now crippled and could no longer see color or work the mystic points without suffering unheard of pain. Certainly, there are things worse than death. Indeed, Onye Sonwu did die, for something must be written before it can be rewritten. But now, see the sign of the peacock. Onye Sonwu left it in the dirt of her holding cell. This symbol is scribbled by a sorcerer who believes he has been wronged. Once in a while, it is scribbled by a sorceress too. It means one is going to take action. Is it not understandable that she'd want to live in the very world she helped remake? That indeed is a more logical destiny. Chapter 1, Rewritten. Let them come then, Onye Sonwu said, looking down at the symbol she'd scratched in the sand, the proud peacock. The symbol was complaint, argument, insistence. She looked down at herself and nervously rubbed her thighs. They'd put her in a long, coarse, white dress. It felt like another prison. They'd chopped off her hair. They'd had the nerve to chop off her hair. She stared at her hands. The circles, swirls, and lines were woven into complex designs, snaking up her wrists. She leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes in the sunshine. The world became red. They were coming. Any moment now, she knew. She'd seen it years ago. She'd seen it. Someone grabbed her with such roughness that she grunted. Her eyes flew open, bitter rage flooding her body and spirit. Bright red in the hot sunshine. She'd cured everything. Yet in doing so, her friends had died. Her Wita, oh, her beloved Wita, her life, her death. The fury filled her. She could hear her daughter raging too. Her daughter had the roar of a lion. 6 thick-armed young men crowded her cell to take her. 3 of them had machetes. Maybe the other 3 were so arrogant that they didn't think they'd need weapons to handle her. Maybe they all thought the evil sorceress named Oye Songwu was resigned to her fate. She could understand why they'd made this mistake. She understood well. Nevertheless, what could any of them do as a change? Nevertheless, what could any of them do as a strange force shoved them all back? 3 of them fell out of the cell. They all sat, lay, and stood watching, slack-jawed and horrified as Onye Songwu threw off her awful dress and changed. She shifted, sprouted, enveloped, stretched, and grew her body. Onye Songwu was expert. She was Ishu. She became a Bonyongo, a fire spitter. Boom! She blasted out a ball of flames so intense that the sand around her melted to glass. The 3 remaining men in her cell were painfully scorched raw, as if they'd been lying in the desert sun for days, waiting to die. Then she blew into the sky like a shooting star ready to return home. No, she was not a sacrifice to be made for the good of men and women, Okiki and Nuru alike. She was Onye Songwu. She had rewritten the great book. All was done, and she could never, ever let her baby, the one part of Wita that still lived, die. Infunanya, he'd spoken those ancient mystical words to her, words that were truer and purer than love. What they shared was enough to shift fate. She thought of the palm wine drunkard in the great book. All he lived for was to drink his sweet, frothy palm wine. When one day his expert palm wine tapper fell from a tree and died, he was distraught. But then he realized if his tapper was dead and gone, then he must be somewhere else. And so the drunkard's quest began. Oye Songwu considered this as she thought about her Wita. Suddenly, she knew where she would find him. He would be in a place that was so full of life that death would flee it for a while. The green place her mother had shown her, beyond the desert, where the land was blanketed with leafy trees, bushes, plants, and the creatures that lived in them. He would be waiting at the Iroko tree. She almost screamed with joy as she flew faster. Can Bonyongo shed real tears? This one could. But what of Benta and Luyu? She wondered with a flicker of hope. Would they be there too? Ah, but fate was cold and brittle. The 3 of us, Sola, Aro, and Najiba, smiled. We, mentor, teacher, and mother, saw it all in the way that sorcerers, experienced and in training, often see things deeply connected to them. We wonder if we will ever see her again. What will she become? When she and Wita unite, and they will, What will become of their daughter who laughed so gleefully inside Oye Son-woo's belly on the way to the green place? If Oye Son-woo had taken one last look below to the south with her keen Bonyongo eyes, she'd have seen Nuru, Okiki, and two Iwu children in school uniforms playing in a schoolyard. In the east, stretching into the distance, she'd have seen black paved roads populated by men and women, Okiki and Nuru, riding scooters and carts pulled by camels. In downtown Durfa, she'd have spotted a flying woman discreetly meeting up with a flying man on the roof of the tallest building. But the wave of change was yet to sweep by directly below. There, thousands of Nuru still waited for Onye Son-woo, all of them screaming, yelling, shouting, laughing, glaring, waiting to wet their tongues with Onye Sewu's blood. Let them wait. They will be waiting for a long, long time. The end. Who fears death? Acknowledgements to the ancestors, spirits, and that place so often called Africa. To my father, whose passing caused me to ask, who fears death? To my mother, to my daughter, Anyango, nephew, Onyedinka, and niece, Obioma, for cheering me up when I was writing the parts of this novel that got me down. To my siblings, Ife, Gosi, and Imisi, for their constant support. To my extended family, always my foundation. To Pat Rothfuss for reading and critiquing Who Fears Death in its infancy back in 2004. To Jennifer Stevenson for having nightmares spawned from this novel. To my agent Don Moss for his vision and guidance. To my editor Betsy Wolham for thinking, seeing, and being outside the box. To David Anthony Durham, Amaka Mbanugo, Tara Krubsack, and Professor Jean Wildman for their excellent feedback along the way. And to the 2004 AP News story by Emily Wax titled, We Want to Make a Light Baby. This article about weaponized rape in the Sudan created the passageway through which Onye Son-woo slipped into my world. The end. Thank you for listening. Bye. It was a phenomenal read. I enjoyed it immensely. Of course, you have to suspend your belief when you're reading fantasy, but it is the story of an African shape-shifting Iwu, most hated, most begrudged of the Okiki and Nuru combined, girl sorceress who was charged with saving the world of the Okiki and Nuru, and who was charged with being the savior for her people, and a woman who stood between people, between the Okiki and the Nuru, her father having raped her mother. She was a product of weaponized rape, a light baby, light hair, light skin, light eyes. a light baby who would be almost like a wiping out of the Okiki race by making herself known, and she walks among the people of the Okiki, a hated and despised member of the Iwu group, a mixed breed, hated. It was wonderful. I loved all of it. It was beautifully characterized. The tension was high at so many points. It was magnificent. And read that book. It is wonderful. So, Nnedi Okorafor, great job. Love you. Bye.